side, because as far as I can see, the input should be okay. Okay, I'm gonna check.
Professor, your audio is going in and out on our end.
Uh-huh. So it's going in and out.
Yeah, it's not just me.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'm gonna close Discord and then restart it and see if that helps. All right. So I am back, and let me make sure that I'm rejoining the channel. Okay, it says I'm connected by voice now, and I just need to restart the screen share. All right, so is it any better now?
Yes.
Sounds way better.
Huh, that's interesting. I'm gonna blame this one on Discord because all I did was to, got out of Discord, make sure that even the docked one, the docked little entry is gone before I restarted. That is weird. Okay, so so you guys have your key to the exam, as well as your actual exam. So this way you can actually cross-check the answer for yourself as well. I did the explanation of my own questions 1, 2, and 3 in the recording, and I think the majority of the class watched that video already. So if you have any questions about that particular video or the explanation of how the individual bits got figured out, you can definitely either use my office hour or you can use the lab time, because I'll explain why the lab time is a little bit flexible today. So I can explain, further explain how the bits are determined by the understanding of the addition and the subtraction rules. So any questions about that? I'm just reading the text channel. Yeah, robot mode activates. More like Android. I see myself more like Lieutenant Data from the next generation, but most of you are too young to know what that means. Alrighty, so what we'll do is we are going to get started with the so-called lab, but it's not really a lab. So let me show you what it looks like. It's not released yet, so you cannot see it yet. So I'm going to release it now. And I am going to let you guys work on this one for, well, today is Thursday. Wow, so we got a weekend. So we'll make it due next Tuesday instead of next Monday. So this way we have one class meeting before this assignment is due. So let me go ahead and edit and change the due date first. And then I'll proceed to let you guys know how to work on this one. Let me see. So next Tuesday is going to be the 29th. Okay, June.
Angels come in all sorts of forms, it looks like.
Sorry? Angels? Oh, you mean this one is being due
Yeah,
next...
I said angels come in many forms, it looks like.
Oh, I forgot. Canvas cannot take a 24-hour format, which is really, really annoying, because that's kind of how most people would enter time these days, is the 24-hour format. So Canvas has a very specific way of specifying time. Talking about angels, for For those of you who have not watched the sci-fi series called Babylon 5, go ahead and watch that one. It definitely has some relationship with angels. Um, Most of you are way too young to have watched it because when the series was released, some of you were not even born yet. But it's an interesting series. TV It's a sci-fi series. Anyway, this lab is now released, and let me go ahead and turn on the preview so you can see exactly what you should be seeing. There we go. The point value is pretty low. Okay, this lab is worth only 4 points. So it's not worth a lot of points, okay? But I think if you do this lab, you will gain a much better understanding of how double works. And that is going to help with your next exam because the double representation is going to be a topic in exam 2. So sooner or later, I think it's going to be useful. So there are two ways to start on this one. There is a zip file. Okay, if you click on this little download symbol, you can download the zip file. That is useful if you already have code blocks installed and you prefer to use code blocks as your IDE, your integrated development environment. So it does include all the source files, includes all the header files, includes all the C source files. If you want to use VS Code, I suspect you can use the same zip file, but you will have to set up the project yourself because the project file included in the zip file is for code blocks only. Alternatively, if you want to use onlinegdb.com, which I have illustrated quite a few times in this class, then you want to download the single source file because as far as I know, OnlineGDB cannot handle multiple source files. So you're going to have to download and use the single source file version of exactly the same thing. So these two are identical in terms of what code is included and what you need to do. It's just that one has multiple source files and then the other one is one single source file. So that's entirely up to you to decide how you want to do this. Okay, so your code should take the struct number pointed to by parameter pn and preserve the value v, which is the mantissa times 2 to the power of exp2 times 10 to the power of exp3. And the restrictions for the homework assignment is as follows. The mantissa should end up as a value that has bit 63 set. So this part relates to the lab that we did day before yesterday, where we want the value of x to be between 2 to the power of 64. No, I take it back. 2 to the power of 63 and 2 to the power of 64 minus 1. Remember that one? So that's kind of why I had that question in the lab, is because I want this mantissa to be within that range. But you're not going to use log or anything like this. This entire program should be done without the use of any double representation, without the use of anything from the math library. So you should only use integer arithmetic operations in this particular lab. So that would include addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You can also use bit shift operators if you're familiar with those, as well as bitwise AND and bitwise OR operators if those are things that you already know. By the end, so by the time your program exits, exp10 should be 0, exp2 can be any integer value, and it is signed. The represented value v should be preserved as much as possible, because as we change mantissa and as we increase exp10, because exp10 starts as a negative value, and hence the name of the assignment, which is negative exponent. So as we change exp10 from a negative integer to 0, we're going to change exp2 from 0 to some negative integer. But in that process, we are not going to be able to preserve v exactly, but we do want to preserve v as much as we can. So that is the objective of this lab. All right, so let me just take a quick poll here. How many people have... Oh, is the video out of sync now? Okay, I'm not getting...
I don't know, you're laggy.
I'm lagging?
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty out of sync.
It's pretty out of sync. All right. So, I'm going to drop out of the voice connection and then go back in. Because the voice connection was automatically reconnected when I restarted Discord, but then I have to go back to restart screen share. So maybe that is the reason why they're out of sync. So let me drop out and I'll go back in. Alright, so voice channel is reconnected and screen share is coming back right now. Alright, is that better? Or does it still feel like a kung fu movie where the closed captioning is where the movement of the mouth doesn't quite match the sound? Better? I don't know what's going on. I mean, I haven't really changed a whole lot of settings since before, and I closed most of the other apps, so it really should not be lagging that much. Huh. Okay. Well, I hope it's bearable. Low bit
I
rate?
think you need nitro.
Sorry?
Or nitro.
Oh, I can put a nitro here. I definitely have a nitro to.
I think you need nitro. Yeah.
I need a nitro? Audio is fine. Okay. Well, I'm gonna look into that maybe some other
Okay,
day.
because only get 15 FPS.
I thought it's 50. I thought it's 50. Maybe they changed that rule again. Alright, so let me see. Server. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do this maybe some other time. Okay. Alright, so getting back to the program. Right. So let me illustrate what is done already in the code and what you need to do. So I'm going to use the single source file version just because I want to use online GDB. So here we go. Here's the download link. And we'll go ahead and save the file. So monolith is just a C file, but it is a single file. It just looks kind of ugly because it's one single file, but that's okay. And then we switch to onlinegdb.com over here. Alright, so for those of you who want to use online GDB, because it is one, it's quite convenient, and two, it's kind of like Google Doc. I mean, when you make changes, you can go ahead and save the file kind of semi-automatically. So I'm going to sign in using my Google account, and you can do the same. Okay, there we go. All right, and it's free. I mean, you don't have to pay anything except your code is now not so private anymore. All right, so I'm gonna put the code into my buffer, and then I'm gonna put it into this editor. Oh, is the video ahead of the audio now? Okay. All right, so I got the code, and I'm gonna paste it in here.
Yeah, but it's
No,
doable.
the audio is ahead of the video, I think.
Maybe it's different for different people.
For me, the video is ahead of the audio because when he said he's logging in Gmail, he said it like seconds later.
Huh. That is weird.
It is.
I think in that case it's probably a Discord issue, and because
For me, the audio is first and then the video is later. I don't know what's going on.
So audio. So for you, the audio is ahead of the video, but for some other people, it's the other way around. And I got some more people to comment on this. Alright, so while you guys are working on that, I'm gonna get to the code. And
yeah, I mean, Discord has problems all the time.
Alright. Well, we can switch to YouTube if you guys want to give that a try, but YouTube is horrible in terms of lag. But the audio and the video would be in sync, even though they're horribly lagging behind. So I'm not really sure which one is a better option. But the video is like 30 seconds ahead in Discord. That is awfully weird. Alrighty. Yeah, so the YouTube link is at the beginning of the text channel. If you guys want to go to YouTube, go ahead. I'm looking at my own computer's load. It's no more and no less than usual. So try Zoom. Zoom wouldn't be able to do our daily log or daily text channel like we are doing right now. There's a way to do it, but most people do not know how to do it. So there's that. We can try Zoom, but not today because it would take too much time to set up the Zoom link and move everybody over there. Okay, so YouTube it is. If the time difference on Discord is too much, is too annoying, you can go ahead and go to YouTube. I think YouTube is fairly consistently maybe 14 seconds or so behind, but at least the video and the voice would be in sync. So that should be okay. Alrighty. So now I'm going to illustrate what you need to do. There's a function called exp10 to exp2. That is the only function you should be doing anything. You are more than welcome to read the code of all of the other functions, not a problem, but don't change the other functions. Okay, so in online GDB, you have to specify that you are programming in C. So in the language, you'll go ahead and pick C. This is not C++. Although, if you pick C++, the program probably will work as well. Okay, I'm just guessing. I'm not sure what it's going to do with the pound include, so we're going to have to test it and see what it's going to do with that. So we'll go ahead and try to debug this program. And it doesn't like the pound include, so go ahead and just remove all the pound include, especially and only the ones with double quotes. The ones with angle brackets, they're fine because they're referring to system header files, but the ones referring to local header files, just go ahead and remove all of those. I can also just give you guys a version without all of those pound includes, so this way you don't have to deal with having to edit the file the way that I'm doing right now. So all I'm doing is to remove the pound includes that has double quotes for the path. There we go. So for those of you who are curious about, okay, once we have the regular expression, how do we parse something according to the regular expression? The parsing functions, does basically just that. So if you're curious about that, that's something you can look into. So let's go ahead and debug again. And it's still complaining about one more reference. I forgot. So there are quite a few pound includes with the double quotes. Alright, so let's try again. Alright, so this time it ran. Okay, very good. So the way I'm going to illustrate it is to put a breakpoint in exp10 to exp2 first. And the way you put a breakpoint in online GDB is to click next to a line number to the left-hand side of a line number. So that will allow you to put a breakpoint. So when you run the program, so this is how you run the program. This is something that you guys have to pay attention to, is when you run the program, you have to run it with parameters. So R is run, and then you have to supply the parameter of -n, and then whatever base 10 scientific notation you want to use. Now, in this particular program, you only have to handle the cases where the exponent is negative, so you don't have to handle the cases where the exponent of 10 is non-negative. But you might want to test with something that is quite negative, so this way it will force the algorithm to have to use the logic that I'll be testing when I grade your program. So this is the way you run the program. If you're not using online GDB, if you're using code blocks, or if you're using VS Code, you will have to look up how to do this. These are called command line arguments. So look up how to specify command line arguments when you are using something other than online GDB. So you press the enter key and the program is going to stop here. So even though the breakpoint is on line 122, it is now stopping at line 126. And that really has to do with which line, okay, between the two, the open and the close brace, which line is associated with the address of the return of this particular subroutine. So it doesn't really matter which one we're dealing with, but the most important part is what is Pn as our parameter. So when you look at Pn, it is a pointer to a structure, and the name of the structure is number with the uppercase N. So there are a few ways you can do this. The easiest way is to use print in GDB and then dereference Pn. So now we can see inside Pn are a few members. We have member sign, which is 0. We have member Mantissa, which is 123. We have member exp10, which is -47. And then we have member exp2, which is 0 at this point. So this allows you to at least know how the structure starts. And now the question is, how is the structure supposed to end with this particular sample of using 1.23e -45. So if you're curious about that, so that you can check your program to make sure that your program works correctly, then what you can do is, let me get back to the question here. So you can scroll all the way down, and at the very end of the description of the homework, there is a log file that you can download. So if you download the log file, it's just going to be a text file. So I'm going to use mousepad to open it. And I'm going to bring mousepad into view right here. So you can see how the Mantissa is getting changed, and every time the Mantissa changes, either exp2 will change or exp10 will change to compensate for the change of the Mantissa. So you can see initially, this is a pretty long file, by the way. So you can see initially all we are doing is we're just doubling the Mantissa, and then every single time we double, exp2 is going to decrement by 1 because we have to maintain the quantity being represented to be the same. And we have not done a single thing with exp10, and that's because of what we talked about in the previous class. We want to maximize the numerator, or the dividend, the number being divided, as much as we can before we carry out the division to minimize the error. So at some point, okay, it's going to stop increasing right there. Okay, so we can see you can see how exp2 went from -56 to -57. And then at this point, between these two, you can see how the Mantissa just quote-unquote lost a digit. That's because we divided by 10. So as we divide Mantissa by 10, we increase exponent 10, exp10 by 1. So exp10, which was -47 to begin with, according to GDB. See right here, let me get back to that screen. So according to this, exp10 started off with a value of -47, and it became -46 because we divided the Mantissa by 10, and that's also including rounding, because if we were just to divide the mantissa by 10, we would end up with a 5 here. But the reason why it ended up with a 6 is because of the rounding technique that we talked about in the previous class. And I'm not going to tell you what that technique is, because we talked about it, and it is also in the module. So you are supposed to read the module and or watch the previous video to find out how to do rounding without the use of using the double representation. So once it was divided by 10, it got double again, got double again, got doubled again, and then at this point we divided by 10 again. So you can see how it quote unquote lost a digit, but once again there's rounding involved. And then the exponent of 10 also got changed from -46 to -45, and so on. So the rest of this log is rather long, okay? And at the very end, this is the end result. So at the very end, mantissa has this particular value, and then exp10 disappeared. Okay, it basically became 0, and then we have exp2 being -213 down here. So this is for helping you to debug your program. If you are to use the same number to begin with, which is 1.23e -45, this is how the program is supposed to end in terms of the members, the values of the members of what Pn is pointing to. So I'm going to pause here for at least 15 seconds because some of you are on YouTube, and there's a severe lag on YouTube. So I'm going to stop and see if you guys have any questions. Alrighty, looks like there are no questions.
I missed the part where we went from online GDB to text file.
All right, so
how did that happen?
All right, so
I've never used the online GDB before, so a lot of this is a little over my head.
All right, so online GDB is an IDE. It's an integrated. It's an integrated development environment, and as a result, I can see how my audio is lagging behind because I can see the activity of my own voice is also lagging behind in Discord, and that is very, very strange. Okay, let me just check my settings and see if I did something stupid to make that happen. Let's see. Behind, because I can see the. That is funny. It's definitely behind by a whole lot. For those of you who are now on YouTube, are you seeing any lagging behind in terms of the voice? All right, I'm gonna guess the answer is no. This is so weird.
No, it's fine.
It is? Okay. All right, so let me get back to the question on the text channel. So the answer to Fang's question is yes, we are writing this in C. And on YouTube, there's no lagging behind. That's funny. So it's definitely a Discord thing then. All right. Not much I can do about that one. Okay, so to address the original question of how to do the transition, so this file, the log file that you're looking at right now, sample.log, all that is really just a way for you so that you know how the Mantissa EXP2 and EXP10, those are all members of a structure, how they're supposed to change over time. Okay, so that's what the log file is for. Your program is not supposed to output something like this. Your program is supposed to change the members of what PN is pointing to silently, and these are the values that should be in those members of the structure pointed to by PN. So EXP2 is supposed to be negative 213, Mantissa is supposed to be 16 and then followed by, I'm guessing, 18 digits. And then EXP10 is supposed to get down to 0. So that is how your program is supposed to do it. I think I heard your voice earlier, Eric. I think your question was about how to use online GDB, if I understand it correctly. I'm just waiting. So maybe something is terribly wrong because it's possible that my voice is lagging so far behind on Discord. Okay. All right. So to use online GDB, it really is just switching between debug and edit. So when you're done debugging, you basically click the stop button so you can go back and edit the source code. All right, so we got a new question. So what we are supposed to do if we don't want to use code blocks or GDB? It's GDB, which stands for GNU Debugger. Well, then you choose whatever you want. I mean, you guys took CISP310s, 360, sorry. You are taking 310 right now, but you took CISP360. So you must know at least one way to develop C or C++ programs. Yeah, just go ahead and move to YouTube and only use Discord for text messages, but for watching the screen share and also my voice, you'll go to YouTube. So does that answer the question about what to use if you do not want to use code blocks or GDB or online GDB? There are so many ways to do this. I mean, pick whatever way works for you. That's all I'm gonna say. Because you took CISP360 already, so you must know at least one way to write your programs in C or C++. So is that answer okay? I mean, so we got one question coming in, two questions coming in. I'm just waiting for the text on Discord to be done. Alright, so here's one. You mentioned that we need to change something in the command line. What I said was you have to make sure whatever tool you're using will let you specify what the command line arguments are when you run the program. Yeah, you can use Replit for it. I believe some people mentioned that Replit actually does allow the specification of command line options, so you can use that. Okay. Yep, there you go. So use whatever tool. Whatever tool works for you is fine. You just want to make sure that you have access to a debugger, okay? Because without a debugger, you're going to have to spend a lot more time to figure out this program. If you have access to a debugger, it makes it easier. And since okay, let me just kind of go to Replit and find out what tool is supported over there. Okay. I have an account here too, so I'm gonna see if I can sign in with my Google account. That's the school Google account. Okay, it does know that I have a few accounts. Alrighty. Alright. Alright, so it does allow C. And I'm not gonna import from GitHub. So I'm gonna call this one test and create it. Oh, okay. I just saw something. If you do not pay, it's gonna be public. So that might be an issue because I don't want your code to be visible by everybody else. So Replit does not have a debugger. Okay, well, if it does not have a debugger, you kind of have to figure out how you want to write the code. Okay, all I'm gonna say is pick the tool that you feel most comfortable with, and if you have used Replit before to write your programs in CISP310, you must be used to not having a debugger to begin with. So maybe you don't need a debugger. I personally, would rather, choose a tool that has a debugger built into it, like Online GDB. It uses GDB, which is a very common tool, and you can do it on the command line. You can use Online GDB, so it's really kind of useful that way. So it's up to you guys. Okay, I'm not gonna specify what tool and how you're gonna write your program. I'm just going to suggest, Online GDB is one resource, CodeBlocks is the other one that I have used. But if you prefer to use some other tools, go ahead, but I may not be able to help you as much because I'm not familiar with the other tools. So that is all that I'm saying. All right. So I think that is all that I need to tell you about this assignment. The most important point is you have to be able to specify the command line arguments when you run the program, because that is how you pass the string that is specifying a base 10 scientific notation for the program to process. And you're not supposed to change the rest of the program either. C is a subset of C++, so I suspect this program will also compile in C++. So we'll go ahead and give it a try, right? Turn it into C++ and debug it and see if it chokes. Nope, it's fine. Yeah, C++ is a superset of C for the most part. There are certain things you can only do in C but not in C++, but that section is fairly small. So for the most part, you can use C or C++ for this code. And I have no idea why someone would want to use C++ instead of C for this project. You're not supposed to use C in, you're not supposed to use C out, you're not supposed to bring in the math library or template library. So I'm not even sure why C++ is going to give you any benefits in this case. All right, so we got another question coming in through the text channel on Discord. I'm going to wait a little bit here so the rest of you can also use this time to formulate your question. All right, Visual Studio has a debugger. That is true. VS Code actually has a lot of plugins. It probably has one plugin for GCC and GDB, and you just have to, install it, and and voila, you can now use GCC to compile the program, and then use GDB to debug the program. Okay. I cannot understand why the rest of you, most of you, are not familiar with C, because C is a subset of C++, which means whatever you do in C++, most of those can be done in C also. Maybe you have not been taught that either, right? I mean, maybe in CISP360, your professor did not tell you that C++ is for the most part an extension of C. Am I correct about that? Well, I'm going to assume that is what is happening, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. It would not make sense at all for someone to ask me.
I mean, I remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do remember him saying things about it being related to C and the like, but we definitely didn't really touch that heavily on it.
Okay.
It was just kind of like conceptually, it's pretty similar, and then it was more or less just a conversation piece. And
I see. You can use Google search and look for, how does C relate to C++? And here we go. We got some answers. As we know, don't you like those, starting of a sentence? As we know, both C and C++ are programming languages. The main difference between these two is C is a procedural programming language and does not support classes and objects, while C++ is a combination of both procedural and object-oriented programming languages, which implies what you can do in C can also be done in C++, just not the other way around. All right. So that's really kind of an important piece about C++ that I would assume your CISP360 professor would mention at least a few times in class. Anyway, so now we know that the program would also work when you compile it as a C++ program. It doesn't change the fact, okay? It does not change the fact that Pn is a pointer. And the struct, for the most part, is like a class, except everything is public, and it cannot contain, well, in C at least, it cannot contain member functions. It can only contain member properties. But you're not going to change it, okay? You're not changing the definition of struct number, so it's a non-issue as far as you're concerned. You just have to know that Pn points to a structure, and you have to access members of the structure pointed to by Pn. So this is the first program where pointers become sort of important, not super duper important, but this is the first program where pointer becomes kind of important, as is the concept of a structure. In the next few weeks, okay, before the end of this session, we'll be depending heavily on the concept of pointers as well as structures, so be prepared for those topics to come. Alrighty. I think that's all we need to talk about with this program. And as most of you are thinking right now, this is not going to be able to be done in 80 minutes. Or at least you think you cannot, okay, which is okay. I understand that. So that's why this program is due next Tuesday. Now, just because the due date is next Tuesday does not mean that I am encouraging people to procrastinate until next Tuesday in the morning and frantically try to get it done before our lecture starts. I'm telling you this because that is usually what happens when I teach this class in previous semesters. And I also want to remind you that my response time in terms of the syllabus is supposed to be within 24 hours, okay? But I do have office hour from 11 to noon, and that includes the noon of next Tuesday. But that's just an hour, okay? So don't push to next week to work on this program. I would start on it tonight, because I will be here. I will be online during the lab time. So if you get started, this like tonight, I'll be able to help you, at least with the tools, or explain something that does not seem to be obvious, okay? But if you start too late and you cannot find me, or you post questions on Discord and I'm not responding because it's not my office hour, and and I have other things to do too. I mean, so that's why there's a turnaround time of 24 hours. So don't push it, okay? If you push it, you may not find me available to answer your questions. So just saying, just saying. Go ahead. Oh, I thought somebody wanted to use the voice channel. All right. So with this done so far, okay, if you do have questions, don't hesitate to ask in the text channel. But I'm gonna move on. Okay, the time is 6:15 right now. Yeah, let's go ahead and take row now. So we'll go ahead and take row. And that's not the right one. Today is the 24th. And in my experience, the day after an exam is also when people start not to show up, because they think I'll be talking about the solution of the exam. I have no idea why people do not show up here, because that is actually also quite important. Alright, so let me first set the due date. I'm gonna give you guys until like 6:30 to do it. Way more time than you need. There we go. So we set the time. And let me go.
It looks like about a fourth of the class dropped.
Sorry? I could not hear that last comment, sorry. Alright, so the word for row taking is Minesweeper. So I'm going to type it here so you guys can just copy and paste it. Minesweeper. And then I'll save and publish now. Okay, so we got a bunch of people typing in the text channel. And now it just says several people are typing. Okay, I got one private, one DM coming in, so I'm going to read that. Nope, that's not related. I'm not sure what that means. Our voice comes later or what? Okay, so we're having serious problems with Discord. I can get out of Discord and then come back in again. Alright, so the question is, since the lab homework is due next Tuesday, so do we have lab work on Monday, which is the 28th, or do we keep working on the assignment? I'm going to give you guys the next assignment on Monday, which is related to the assignment that I am assigning today. So there's a little bit of an overlap, but I think that overlap is healthy. You will still be given enough time on the assignment that I will give you on the 28th, which is also, a programming type assignment. Alright, so I'm going to get out of Discord and go back in again and see if that changes anything. I don't have a whole lot of hope here, but we'll give it a try. So I'm quitting Discord now. If you're watching YouTube, it should not interfere with YouTube at all. So let me go back into Discord. And I'm gonna get out of voice first and then go back in and see if that helps. Alright, so I'm getting back into Discord, just the voice for now, and I am going to screen share as soon as I can click it. There we go. And alright. I'm not sure about 1/4 of the class dropped, since the exam. I knew a few people dropped, but not as far. Last time I checked, it was only two. Two people dropped from the class. Alright, so I'm hoping the video voice versus the voice is now more in sync in Discord. I'm not sure. Oh, okay, finally. Yeah, for now, that's it. That's good. Alright, so in terms of road taking, the word is Minesweeper. Are we all done with that road taking activity? I cannot check on this screen. Well, I can check off screen, but but I cannot check on this particular screen how people are doing. I can do it on a different window so that you guys cannot see who took road, because technically road taking can be considered student privacy. Okay, so I can see a few people have not done the road taking yet, so you might want to get on it and make sure you get it done. Alright, so I will leave it up to you guys to finish the road taking activity, and the word is Minesweeper. There is a reason why I chose the word Minesweeper. So if I tell you Minesweeper, what pops up in your mind? It's a game, right? It's a game that comes with Windows and probably many other operating systems. And the objective of the game is to sweep all the mines using, you can probe, and it will tell you, how many surrounding cells, has a mine, and it will give you a total number. I cannot remember the exact details, okay? But it's a game where you have to understand the rule of the game first, okay? And then what you need to do is to use logic, okay, to eliminate possibilities, okay, and to figure out, to deduce, okay, where the mines are. So the exam 1 was designed like that, okay. At least part 1 is designed like that, because given the few bits, okay, the first 3 questions will only give you 4 known bits, but based on the 4 known bits, okay, when you apply the rules that we learned in this class about addition and subtraction, binary addition and binary subtraction, all the borrow, all the carry, all the Q terms, the sum, the difference terms, and the overflow, and also the L flag, all of those are constraints. All of those specify, the rule of the game. So using the very few clues, you are supposed to find out, by using the process of elimination, to figure out, exactly what each cell is supposed to be, a 1 or a 0. So that's the reason why I chose the word Minesweeper for today's road taking. Yeah, 39 people. That's people have been dropping off, on and off. I don't think that's just before the exam. I think 39 people started. Are you counting people on Discord? Because if you're counting people on Discord, that is because I did not kick anyone out until yesterday. So there were a whole bunch of people who dropped the class already, or did not show up at all from the waitlist, that I did not kick out of the server, the Discord server. So that's why you are seeing a lot more people than there actually are. All right, no problem. I just wanted to let you guys know, why there's a high number, and now it's a lot smaller when you count the number of participants on Discord. Alrighty. So, with this out of the way, we are going to start on something new. So finally, we are moving on to something, and we are now closer to actually being able to program in assembly. So we are almost done. We're actually done, sorry. We are actually done with talking about, well, maybe not. Nah, I think we are done with floating point representation. So what we're going to do now is to talk about D flip-flop and other basic memory devices. I'm looking at the time. We still got about 25 minutes today, so that's actually good. So we can actually get into a decent amount of discussion of this slide here. Alrighty. So Barak, your mic is on, so I can occasionally hear your mic picking up something. Thank you. And then we have a text comment on the text channel. I think that happens in most courses. As the first days go by, people start dropping the course. Okay, I got to tell you the statistics of CISP300. Not this class, okay, but 300. 300 has a drop rate, or they call this attrition, of about 50%. So, within from the first day of class to the last day of class, the class size can, on the average, reduce by 1/2. Now the dropout rate is not quite as bad with the more advanced classes, but there's still a drop off rate even for the higher level classes. I can also tell you my personal experience when I took CISP310, or what is equivalent to CISP310, from SFSU, from San Francisco State University. When I took the class, it was offered as a once per week class. So you can kind of imagine 3 hours of lecture only on Monday in the evening for one semester. The guy who taught the class was an adjunct from Berkeley. I'm not really sure whether he taught at UC Berkeley or he's just from Berkeley somewhere. But anyway, the class started off with 60 students, 60 people. And it ended up with, I think, 15. Yes, you heard right. It went from 60 students to 15 students at the very end. I am not modeling my class after that one. I'm just telling you a piece of information based on my personal experience. Yes, that's 75% attrition. Assembly language is interesting because it is also called the divide of in computer science, in a computer science program. So if you it's kind of like abstract algebra in math. So there are people who get all the way up to a certain point, but if they cannot get past abstract algebra, if they want to get a math degree, they are usually diverted to some other majors. Because abstract algebra is one of those classes where it really tests whether someone is ready to take on more advanced math classes. Yeah. So I'm not modeling my class, after the one that I took, many years ago. But I really want everybody to succeed in the class. I mean, so there's that. All right, so we're gonna get started with SR latch, which is a device, and it's a very interesting device. So for the first time, I am going to describe a circuit, not using a diagram, but using text. So some of you look at this and go like, but that doesn't look like a circuit. Well, it does, in a way specify the connectivity between the components of a circuit. So you can look at this and look at this here as a class, okay? So it's a template. It creates, objects. So N1 and N2 are objects, and each object is an NAND2 device. Input pins, we have S and R, so each one is an input pin. We have 2 output pins, Q and NQ. And then circuit is lowercase, which means it is an object, and this object has a member function called add node. And we are adding a node, and when we add a node, we are basically specifying what is connected together in the circuit. So we are connecting S as an input pin to N1.in bracket 0 because N1, which is an N2 gate, has 2 input pins. So we are only connecting to the first input pin like this. So if you feel this is a little bit too much, because we haven't used this representation before, that's okay. We are gonna, I will draw this as a diagram so that this way it is more familiar to us. So let me start up Logisim, and then we'll go ahead and draw the picture in Logisim. And Logisim also allows us to simulate the circuit, so we can actually run the circuit in Logisim. So here's Logisim, and I'm going to turn off simulate first. Okay, so I'm going to disable simulation. So this way, as I draw the circuit, it won't automatically try to tell us what the states are in terms of the pins and the gates. Alright, so I'm just going to throw in all the components. Okay, I can remember this circuit fairly well, so I don't need to look at the text representation. So we have 2 input pins. So here's one. Here's the other one. We got 2 output pins. Okay, so once again, here's one. And then here's the other one. And then we have 2 NAND gates. So we go to gates. And I'm going to do something here that you can also do if you want to. The default NAND gate is kind of big. It's also not only in terms of the symbol, but it also has 5 inputs, which is not what we need. Okay, most of the time we only need 2 inputs. So if I change the property before I put a component into this window here, it's basically changing what the class definition is specifying as a default. So that means from now on, when I create more NAND gates, by default they would only have 2 input pins, and also by default they would also be a smaller version in terms of the symbol, because this is what we are going to use more often than the kind of gigantic version. So it is more convenient to change the default template so that I don't have to keep changing it every time I have to create a circuit using NAND gates. So I'm going to space things out a little bit more so it's obvious how things are connected. So there we go. So we got all of these. And I'm going to also name the pins and whatnot. So let's name this one as S. So these are exactly the same name as the objects in the text description. And this one is N1. This one is N2. And then the output one is Q, and the other one is NQ. There we go. Alright, so we're going to do the connection. The input pin S goes to one input of N1. Okay, that's pretty easy and straightforward. And R goes to N2. Oops. There we go. I twitched. There we go. And then the output of N1 goes to Q. Okay, like so. And then the output of N2 goes to NQ. And now here is the fun part. Okay, the fun part is in all the circuits that we have done up to this point, including the carry or borrow local head circuit, things only go in one direction. Okay, so the output of something always goes to the input of the next quote-unquote stage of gates. But this time we're going to have something that goes back. Okay, so the output of N2 becomes one of the inputs of N1. Oops, there we go. And then the output of N1, it is actually symmetric, goes to the other input of N2. So now we have a circuit like this. So what are we going to do with this circuit, right? How do we analyze what this circuit is going to do, and why does it have anything to do with memory? So now the question is, what are we going to do? Well, what we're going to do is I will go ahead and draw this circuit in on my tablet, so this way I can describe the scenarios a little bit better. So let me switch to the tablet first. Okay, there we go. Where's my tablet? All the way down here. Okay, there we go. So let's imagine that we have 0 as the first input pin and a 0 for the second input pin. So this is the easier scenario to analyze. Okay, so we're gonna have the output here, have the output here. This goes here, this goes here, and then this one goes back here, and then this one goes back here. There we go. All right. So we now know that we have 2 input pins and they're both zeros to begin with. So my question is, given that both input pins are zeros, can we work out and determine the output pins of the NAND gates? So this is N1, this one is N2. Okay, let me label. This is N1, this is N2, this is S, this is R, this one is NQ, and this, oops, sorry, misspoke. This one is Q and this one is NQ. So the question is, can we determine the output of N1, which is a NAND gate? And can we determine the output of N2, which is a NAND gate? I know conceptually, okay, at least at first glance, it seems to be impossible because it seems to be a feedback thing. It seems to be a chicken and egg problem, right? Because the output of N1 influences N2, and then the output of N2 goes back and influences N1. So how do we stop this circular reasoning? Well, it's not circular. It is not circular at all. In other words, what N2 is outputting is not going to influence the output of N1 in this case, and whatever N1 is outputting is not going to influence the output of N2 in this specific case because of the state of the input pins. So I want you guys to think about this and tell me what can we determine about the output of N1 and also the output of N2. You kind of have to think about what a NAND gate is. I'm waiting for answers on the text channel. So if you want to, put in an answer, you can put it into the text channel. All right. I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to tell you how we're going to analyze this circuit. Okay. The first thing we do is we look at a truth table. Okay, truth tables are very useful tools to visualize what a gate or what a logical operator can do. So looking at a truth table, we have S and R, and then we have the NAND gate, N1. So we're going to have NAND. So the first one is the S NAND, whatever N2 has, okay, N2.out, okay, and the S can be false, can be, okay, so we'll just consider this case here. This should be obvious enough. Yes, so Eric is correct that a NAND gate is the negated AND gate. So if we know one input of the NAND gate is a 0, do we need to know what the other one is before we can determine the output of the NAND gate? That is the question. If we already know that one input of the NAND gate N1 is a 0, do we also need to know what the other input pin is before we can determine what the output is going to be? That is the question. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Yes, your guess is correct. Okay, your guess is correct. So, okay, so I can see from the text channel that I'm going to explain this. Okay, so we will take a look at something not related to the circuits. Oh, okay, I just open up a new page, not intended. But I want you guys to focus on this one here. So we'll have x, y, which has nothing related, it doesn't relate to the circuit at all. So we just have x as a Boolean variable, y as a Boolean variable. And instead of using the obscure NAND operation, I'm going to use the conventional C notation here so that it is clear what expression we are evaluating. That really is the equivalence of a NAND gate, but expressed in a more familiar representation, because this is how C specifies logical negation and logical AND. So x can be false, x can be true, y can be false, can be true, y can be false, can be true. So now we look at the truth table. Okay, so in this case we have 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay. Oh, Discord is still lagging behind, or YouTube always lags behind. Yeah, YouTube always lags behind by 15 seconds. And the idea was, it's at least the video versus the voice is more synchronized. But according to Paul, Discord has recovered at this point. Okay. Okay, Andre, you're forgetting something. What is this? Yes, it is a not. So 0 and 0 is a 0, not 0 is a 1. That's why. Let me check the YouTube viewership, because there's a graph, a live graph that shows me how many people are viewing live. So I want to see how it's dropping off. Well, we still have about 11 or 10 people. At least the last ping, still has about 11 people watching on YouTube. So I'm gonna. It doesn't refresh like quote unquote in real time, but it does give me a trend over time. All right. So getting back to our question here. Do you see how whenever x is 0, regardless of what y is, the output is always going to be a 1? Do you guys see that? So what is that telling us? It's telling us that if at least, and also the other one. Okay, let me illustrate the other one too. I'm going to use a circle this time. So you can see how whenever y is a 0, the output is also guaranteed to be a 1. So that means if at least one input of the NAND gate is a 0, the output of the NAND gate is already guaranteed to be a 1, regardless of what the other pin has to say. So that means in this particular circuit, okay, we are guaranteed to get 1 and 1 as the output. And the latch is symmetric, yes. The latch is structurally symmetric. It's just that the labeling, is not symmetric, because otherwise it makes it very difficult to understand. All right, so Folian is typing something, but I want the rest of you, to really think about this. Okay, make sure that you do understand why when the inputs are 0, 0, the outputs would be 1 and 1, because that's the behavior of a NAND gate based on the truth table here. I'm not sure what the guess is. The guess about, I cannot remember what I asked earlier. But the point I want to illustrate is we do understand, we do know what it's going to output. As long as we know one input is a 0, we always want we know the output of the NAND gate is a 1. That is correct. So that also works for a multi-input port NAND gate. So even if the input the NAND gate has 5 inputs, if at least one of the 5 is a 0, the output of the NAND gate is also guaranteed to be a 1. And that has to do with the truth table. And that is correct. We don't even care about what the other input is, because it is illustrated here in the truth table. Whenever x is false, we don't care what y is. The output is guaranteed to be 1 here. If we know that y is a 0 here and here, the output is guaranteed to be a 1 regardless of what x is, because in the first case y being 0 is bundled with x being 0, but in the second one y being 0 is bundled with x being 1, but regardless of which one we're talking about, the NAND output is still a 1. So the truth table is helping us to visualize why, if at least one input is a 0, the NAND gate is going to output a 1. So are we good so far? Are we good with this particular state of the circuit? And that is really, it just has to do with the truth table of the NAND gate. All right. So assuming that we are okay with the analysis of this state here, we're going to transition. Okay, so we're going to transition and say, we'll just say that the S pin, which is the input pin here, is going to do a transition of 0 to 1. Okay, so now our new circuit is going to look like this. We have a 1 here, we still have a 0 here, and then we have the 2 NAND gates, right? And then the 2 outputs. Alright, so in this case, I'll hook up the connectivity first. But now the question is, how do we analyze this circuit at this point? How do we know how the change of the S pin going from 0 to 1, and how that is going to influence the output of the NAND gates? So the trick to do this is to maintain the input, because it takes time for the change of the input pins of a gate to affect the output gate, to affect the output of the same gate. So even though we are changing the input pin right now, the inputs into this NAND gate would remain the same. Okay, so that means we are looking at the old state of N2. The output of N2 was a 1, right? So we had, at least for a moment, we have a 1 here. And because the other pin is also a 1, so if over a certain amount of time, the output of this NAND gate will transition to a 0, because 1 NAND 1 is a 0. So the output of this one is going to output a 0. But we also have to make sure that the transition of the 0 of the S pin going to a 1 is not going to affect this NAND gate here. But that's pretty true, because the output of the previous output of N1, which is a 1, continues to be a 1 here. And then the input pin R is maintaining its own 0. So the output of the bottom NAND gate, which is N2, is maintaining to be a 1 over here. Okay, so there's a request to talk about the first circuit. So the first circuit is going to output 1 and 1 because of the truth table. If you have a NAND gate, if at least one input of the NAND gate is a 0, the output is guaranteed to be a 1. That's the reason. Oh, Discord is choppy again. I'm guessing it is not a local issue. I'm guessing this is a server issue on Discord's side. That is unfortunate, because that means people have to move back onto YouTube again. But we are close to finishing the class, so we are gonna let us finish this discussion on next Monday. Just because Discord is not behaving today, we can look into Zoom, but I really hesitate to use Zoom because Zoom has a lot of Discord has a lot of features over Zoom, and I really do not like using Zoom. I know how to use it, I just don't like using it because of the lack of some features. So we'll continue this discussion on next Monday, and I think I released the lab already, which is not really a lab, because it's due next Tuesday. Let me just double check and make sure. Yeah, so it is already. Oh no, that doesn't tell me. Let me just double check. Yeah, it is published. Okay, so you guys have access to it. It does not have an access code as far as I can remember. Yeah, so this one does not have an access code, so don't worry about the access code. Just go ahead and get started with this lab. So I'm done with the lecture part. I'm ready to get rid of the streaming and also the screen share.